Welcome to Construction Math. Today we're going to be talking about solving equations and inequalities. So on your note taker for bell work, before you start, think about as many ways as communicating as possible and write at least 2 on your note taker. Share with your partner. Teacher, call on non-volunteers when they're finished, and I'll meet you back here in a minute or 2. Welcome back. First thing we need to do is do a math check. I need you to write down in your own words what's the difference between an equation and an inequality. And then the second part is I want you to identify these 3 symbols. So pause the video, have the students answer the questions, have them compare with their partners, call on non-volunteers, and I'll meet you back here shortly. Welcome back. An equation means, with the equal sign, means that both sides are exactly equal to each other in value. An inequality means one side is greater than or less than the other. Now the symbols, this symbol greater than or equal to means greater than or equal to. It's got the 2 symbols in one. The greater than sign on the top and half the equal sign on the bottom. The second one means less than or equal to. Now, in the objectives today, fill in the missing terms. Step number 1, use the steps for solving equations and inequalities to explain the steps of a solution. Why are we able to do that? Number 2 is we're going to solve equations and inequalities, so fill in the word equations. And number 3 is we're going to solve equations and inequalities for real-world problems. So let's get started. One thing I need you to know, the one vocabulary term that we have today is inverse operations. An inverse operation is an operation that undoes another operation. For example, adding and subtracting are inverse operations. Multiplying and dividing operations are also inverse. It's kind of like going to the light switch, turning it on and turning it off. They undo each other. So on this vocabulary square, please draw a picture or a drawing that's going to help you remember what an inverse operation is, define it in your own words, and write a meaningful sentence. Connections and new information you can fill in now or as the lesson goes on. Teacher, pause the video until students have had a chance to complete. Welcome back. All right, here are the steps for solving equations and inequalities. Step number 1 is to make sure that you simplify each side of the equation or inequality. So use the distributive property, combine like terms. That's step number 1. We're going to simplify by using the distributive property and combining like terms. Fill in the missing terms on your note taker. Step number 2 is move the variables, all the variables to one side and all the numbers to the other. That may be a step you get to skip. So we're going to move variables to one side, numbers to the other. Doesn't matter which side you do it to. All right, step number 3, use inverse operations to undo addition and subtraction first. Addition and subtraction first, and then inverse operations to undo multiplication and division. I realize there's powers and roots, but we're not going to cover that in today's lesson. So make sure all of these are complete, and when they are, restart the video. Welcome back. All right, so what I want you to do is teach each other the steps. Partners decide who's going to be partner A and partner B. Tell or teach the steps to your partner in the correct order. Switch the roles and repeat, because we're going to have a little test on the steps in just a minute. So pause the video until students have had a chance to practice. You can say them in your own words just as long as the meaning's the same. Welcome back. Let's go on to the next. So on your slates, and if you don't have slates out, you can use the back side of one of your note takers, is put these 4 steps in order. Are we going to undo multiplication and division first, second, third, or fourth? Move variables to one side, simplify, or undo addition and subtraction. Teacher, pause the video until students have numbered these steps, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Here are the steps. Step number 1, simplify each side. Step number 2, move the variables to one side and the numbers to the other. Number 3, undo addition and subtraction first. And then number 4, undo multiplication and division next. So I hope you got these steps in mind. So let's go on. Now there's a warning, a be careful sign. Danger, danger. All right. The steps in solving equations and inequalities are the same unless you multiply or divide by a negative. That's the only thing that's different. And we're going to discuss that in some length in just a minute. So if you multiply or divide by a negative, something special happens. Right? If you do multiply or divide by a negative, the direction of the inequality reverses or it flips. So greater than becomes less than becomes greater than or equal to becomes less than or equal to, and less than or equal to becomes greater than or equal to. They just flip direction. So we're going to show all steps in a problem and we're going to label the answers. All right? So why does it reverse? Well, we need to stay true to arithmetic. We can't break those little first and second graders' heart. So I want you on the count of 3 to do thumbs up or thumbs down. Is -3 less than 6 a true statement? 1, 2, 3. Show your teacher. All right, it's a true statement. -3 is less than 6. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to think pair share. You're going to take that statement, -3 is less than 6, multiply both sides by a negative number, and decide which inequality symbol applies. Teacher, pause the video. Please know it doesn't matter which negative number you multiply both sides by, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go to our slates, and let's take a look at this. All right. The problem said -3 is less than 6. That's a true statement in arithmetic. So I'm going to pick a negative number. I'm going to pick -7. And I'm going to multiply both sides by -7. And see what happens. -7 times -3 is +21. -7 times 6 is -42. Now, is 21 greater than or less than -42? It's greater than. Notice the inequality flipped. Let's take another example. -3 times, or is less than -6. I'm going to multiply both sides by -1/3. Just to show you it doesn't matter what number you picked. I bet most of you did not pick -1/3. I'm going to make everything a fraction. All right, negative times negative makes positive. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 1 is 3. That's less than. -1 times 6 is -6. 3 times 1 is 3. Let's simplify. 3 divided by 3 is 1. -6 divided by 3 is -2. It flips. Every time I multiply by any negative number both sides, this inequality flips over. And that's your first rule. So if you multiply an inequality by a negative, it's going to flip the inequality. All right, so add that example to your notes if you don't have one already. I'm going to clear this, and let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so here I multiplied both sides by -2. -2 times -3 is 6. -2 times 6 is -12. Notice it has to flip over to make a true statement. So the less than became greater than. Maybe that's the numbers you picked. All right, so now write on your slates or on the back of your note taker, 10 is greater than -25. That's a true statement. Your job is to divide both sides by a negative number of your choice and then decide what happens to the inequalities. So teacher, pause the video until students have completed that task, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go to our slate. Okay, the true statement was 10 is greater than -25. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by a negative number. And I can divide them by any negative number. Most of you don't like fractions, so my obvious choice is to divide both sides by -5. All right, 10 divided by -5 is -2. -25 divided by -5 is +5. 5 is greater than -2, or -2 is less than 5. Notice the inequality flipped. If you don't want to or don't mind fractions, I'm going to divide both sides by -2. 10 divided by -2 is -5. 25 negative divided by 2 negative gives me 12.5 or 12.5. This flips over. So no matter what negative number you pick, if you divide by a negative, the inequality will flip. So if you don't have an example, add one of these to your notes, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. So let's clear our slates. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right. Now, here's the steps. What we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to teach you how to go through these and pick out the steps. So what I need you to do is add the missing words that are in red to your note taker. So step number 1 is you're going to always copy the problem down. The second step is I look to see, are the variables all on one side? Yeah, there's only a variable on the left, but I need to get all my numbers onto the other side. So I'm going to do the inverse of subtracting 7 is adding 7. So I'm going to undo subtracting by adding 7 to both sides. Then I'm going to simplify. I do a step and I simplify. So the subtracting 7 and adding 7 are inverses. They cancel out. So on the left-hand side, I get 3x. 11 plus 7 is 18. Now I need to get rid of the 3 because I said I need to get numbers all on one side. So the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So the next step is I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And then I'm going to simplify. 3 divided by 3 is 1, so it gives us x. 18 divided by 3 is 6. Now I've got the variables on one side, all the numbers on the other, and I am finished. But what I need you to do is be able to say what the steps are. So you can copy the problem, you can undo subtraction, you can simplify, you can undo multiplication, you can undo division, you can undo addition. So let's look at the next problem. Now, here's the problem. Be careful. Why should I be careful? Because it's a fill in the blank. Because it's an inequality. So I have to be careful. If I multiply or divide both sides by a negative, I'm going to need to flip the inequality. So let's go ahead and look. Let's look at the steps. All right, here are the steps, and I want you to place them I want you to place them next to the steps on your note taker. We've got 3 simplifies. We've got to copy the problem. We've got to multiply both sides by 4 to get rid of the fraction. This does not flip the inequality. We've got an undo multiplying by dividing by 5. The inequality does not flip because we're dividing by a positive. Undo adding 9 by subtracting 9. So go back to this and put the steps in order. I have all the steps there. You just need to put them in order. All right, here are the steps. I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go through and see what the answers look like. First step is always to copy the problem down. On a test, if you just copy the problem down, you're going to get 1 point. Then I need to get rid of the fraction. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 4. It doesn't flip the direction of the inequality because I multiplied both sides by a positive 4. Then I simplify. Now I want to undo. I want to get all the numbers on one side, all the variables on the other. So the opposite or the inverse of adding 9 is subtracting 9. So that's the next step. Then I always simplify. The adding 9 and subtracting 9 are inverses. They cancel out. And negative 16 and negative 9 is negative 25. Now I need to get rid of the 5 in front of the b. The inverse of multiplying by 5 is dividing by 5. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. I divided by a positive number, so it's not going to flip the inequality. And then you always simplify. In math, it's pretty normal when you're solving equations or inequalities, you're going to do a step and you're going to simplify. You're going to do a step, you're going to simplify. How'd you do? All right, the next one is think, pair, share. Problem number 3. Work this with your partner, adding in the missing steps to your note taker, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's check. Always copy the problem. Then I have parentheses, so I'm going to get rid of the parentheses by distributing. So 5 times x is 5x, 5 times y is 5y, pardon me. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5 equals y. Now I need to get the variables all to one side, so I decided to move the 5y's over to the right side. The inverse of a positive 5y is a negative 5y, or subtract 5y. So I move them over, and it gets negative 5, and I have a mistake there, a mathematical mistake. That should be, let's go to the slate so I can fix that mistake. All right, my problem says 5 times y minus 1 is equal to y. All right, that's copy the problem. All right, then I'm going to distribute 5 times y is 5y. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5 equals to y. So this is distribute. You could say get rid of the parentheses. Next thing I want to do is get all the y's on one side, so I'm going to subtract 5y from both sides. All right, so this is subtract 5y. All right, so these cancel out because they're inverses, so I get negative 5. And here's where my mistake was. Y and negative 5y gives me negative 4y, and I had a typo there. All right, so that's simplify. Now I still got to get the y all by itself. It's multiplied to negative 4, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. So I'm going to divide by the inverse, or divide by negative 4. Now I'm going to simplify. Negative divided by negative is positive. I'm just going to leave it 5/4. Negative divided by negative is positive. The negative 4 and the negative 4 in the denominator cancel. So there's my answer, and all I did was simplify. So I can tell my steps. All right, so we're going to undo subtraction. We're going to, up here we undo addition by subtracting. Here we undo multiplication by dividing. All right, pause the video, students, and add this to your note taker. Welcome back. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, now what I want you to do on this problem is to do each answer on your slate. Show your steps. It's an inequality, and explain your steps. All right, pause the video and have students do this. Welcome back. Let's go to our slate. Let's put the problem down. Negative 7x minus 9 is less than negative 51. So first step is just to copy down the problem. Now, I need to get the numbers all on one side, so I'm going to get rid of this first because there's no distributing. So I'm going to undo subtraction by adding 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. Then I'm going to say subtracting 9 and adding 9 are inverses. They cancel out, so I get negative 7x. Adding and subtracting never flip the inequality, equals negative 42. So this step is just to simplify. Now I need to get rid of the negative 7, so I'm going to undo multiplication. Multiplication by dividing by negative 7. So I'm going to divide this side by negative 7, this side by negative 7. So negative divided by negative gives me positive. Negative 42 divided by negative 6 divided by negative 7 is positive 6, and the inequality flips. So I've done two things. I've simplified, and I have flipped the inequality. Why did I flip it? Because I divided by a negative. If those were positives, it wouldn't flip. So teacher, pause the video until students have everything checked, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go to our PowerPoint. Now, on this next problem, there's my answers flipped because we divided. Excellent. Now, I want you to work these two problems. You just solve them. You don't have to write the steps. So pause the video when students have finished. Have the student compare with their partner and call on non-volunteers. Welcome back. Let's go to our slate and let's look at our problem. The first problem said negative 9x plus 6 is less than 24. It's an inequality, so I have to be careful. There's nothing no like terms, there's no distributing, so I'm just going to get all the numbers on one side and all the variables on the other. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to undo the adding by subtracting. Then I'm going to simplify. I get negative 9x. Adding 6 and subtracting 6 are inverses, so they cancel out. 24 plus negative 6 is 18, so I simplify. Now I've got to get rid of this negative 9. He's multiplied times the x, so I'm going to do the inverse. The inverse of multiplying by negative 9 is dividing by negative 9. I'm going to simplify. Multiplying by negative 9 and dividing by negative 9 are inverses, so they cancel each other out. 18 divided by negative 9 is negative 2. But I have to be careful because this is an inequality. I divided both sides by a negative, so the inequality flips. How'd you do on that one? Let's look at the other problem. 40 minus 28x is equal to 138. Now in these problems where it says solve, solve implies that you're going to show every step. So it's an equation. I don't have to worry about anything flipping. I don't have any like terms to add. Don't have any distributing to do because there was no parentheses. So I'm just going to get all the numbers on one side and all the variables on the other. So I'm going to get rid of this positive 40 or adding 40 by subtracting 40. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So I get these cancel. I get negative 28 equals, do the math, 98 if I did the math right. Now I lost my x. Don't lose your variables. People will make fun of you if you lose your variables. So I'm just going to double check. I'm going to divide both sides by negative 28. It's an inequality, so I don't have to make sure anything flips. These cancel out. I get x equals negative 98 over 28. Well, let's simplify. I think both of them will divide by 2. So I get negative, 49 over 14. Oh, I can divide both by negative 7. So I get negative 49 divided by negative 7 is 7. 14 divided by negative 7 is negative 2. Or you could have just divided in your calculator. You could divide 28 into 98. It would give you 7.5. I'm sorry, it would give you 3.5. And remember, it's negative. Okay? 3 times that is 3 times 4, 2, 6, 7, 84. And we add 14 left over. So when I bring the 0 down, there's my answer. So you can have either answer. It never specified whether I could leave it a fraction or a decimal. All right? Take a chance to, take a minute to check. If students are ready, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And now we're going to start to work on some real-world problems. There's my answers. All right. Now, in this particular standard, it just says solve problems. You won't have to set up the problems. So you can read the problem and then notice there'll be an equation or an inequality at the end. So the example says a replacement sheet of plywood for Kara's deck cost $22.50. Add that to your note taker. The carpenter charges $25 per hour for making the repair. How many hours could the repair take if the total bill is under $100? So I'm going to let X equal the hours. In real-world problems, you always pick a variable and tell what it's going to represent and then make the equation. The equation in this case turns out to be an inequality. So she has to pay $22.50 plus 25 times the number of hours, and X is the number of hours, but she needs to stay under $100. So let's go to our slates and let's see how this one works out. All right, it's $22.50 plus 25x has to be less than $100. Now this is an inequality, so I have to be careful. I have to remember that if I multiply or divide by a negative, it's going to flip. But I solve it the same way. This is adding $22.50, so my first step is going to be subtract $22.50. Then I'm going to simplify. So these cancel. Adding $22.50, subtracting $22.50 cancel out. So I get 25x is less than, and I'm going to do the math. I'm going to put on zeros. I'm going to borrow. That makes that a 99. Makes that a 9 and that a 10. Oh, didn't need to do that. Needed to make that a 10. So I get 50 cents. I get $77.50. Let me double check that I got the right answer, and I did. Now, divide both sides by 25 to get the x all by itself. because the inverse of multiplying by 25 is dividing. I divided by a positive, so the inequality is not going to change. So I need to divide 25 into $77.50. With dividing decimals, the decimal comes straight up. 25 can't go into 7, but it can go into 75 3 times. I get 75. Oh, 25 goes into 25 once. So he has to work less than 3.1 hours in order to keep the bill less than $100. All right, make sure that we label, because here this was a dollar sign, this was a dollar sign, this was a dollar sign, and remember the answer wanted to be in hours. All right, make sure everybody has that in their notes and their questions are answered. And when you're ready, let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, there we got it. It's all worked out. So now you try this. The window place assesses a $15 shop charge plus $20 an hour for labor. How many hours of labor did a repair take if the total charge was less than $85? Again, X is equal to of hours. I've set up the equation, or the inequality in this case for you, and I want you to solve this. When you finish solving it, check the steps with your partner. Teacher call on non-volunteers. Pause the video, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go to our slate. All right, so the inequality said 15 plus 20x had to be less than $85. Again, it's an inequality, so I have to be careful. I'm going to undo the addition first. So the first step is I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. I'm going to simplify. These cancel out because they're inverses. Here I get 70, and I lost my x again. Now divide both sides by 20, and x would be less than 3.5 hours. I got 3.5 hours because I divided 20 into 70, goes 3 times. I decided to stay in decimals, and it went 0.5. How'd you do? If you came up with 7 halves, if you came up with 3 1/2, your answer is exactly right. All right. So when students are ready, restart the video and we'll go back to the PowerPoint. Well, let's go back to the PowerPoint. One last problem. Okay. Here we go. Professor Kleinwort receives 2 estimates for the repair of fascia. The first shop will charge $595 for the parts he needs plus $22.50 for labor. A second shop offers to repair the fascia for $700 plus only $19 per hour for labor. How many hours of labor must be involved in order to make the second estimate less than the first or cheaper? So I've got my inequality set up, the $595 plus the $22.50x, and x is the number of hours. When is it greater than the $700 plus the $19 per hour for labor? So work this problem, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go to our slates and work this problem. All right, we've got the first the equation that says 595 plus 2250x. When is that greater than 700 plus 19x? So I want to get all the variables on one side, all the numbers on the other. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 595. I happen to personally like my variables on the left-hand side and my numbers on the right-hand side. That's totally up to you. So these cancel. I get 2250x, I remember my variable this time, equals 105 plus 19x. All right, now I've got to move my variables to the other side, so the opposite of adding 19x is subtracting, or the inverse is subtracting 19x. I simplify. These cancel because they're inverses. Here I get 3.5x. Divide both sides by 3.5, and x has to be greater than 30 hours. You can crank that into your calculator if your teacher allows, or just divide it. Remember, when you divide decimals, you move this one place, you move this one place, and fill it in with a 0. It'll go in 3. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1. 3 times 3 is 9, and 1 more is 10. And there's where I get my 30. And that's the last for this part. So make sure you get the answers copied down, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. Welcome back. Let's go back to our PowerPoint. One last thing you need to do. Oh, there's our answer all worked out. Now, 3-minute closure statements. All you need to do is pick any 2 of these prompts and answer them on your note taker. Teacher, when students are completed, have them share with their partner and then call on non-volunteers. I'll meet you back here next time for another construction math lesson.